Our next speaker is John Richardson from the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience. John's been working in this space for many years, and we're really pleased to have him along today to offer his talk about, and I have to keep making sure I don't say well-being in this title. It's all about being well. Thank you, John.
So I've been kicking around this stuff for about 25 years in a number of different roles, and I will say at the outset that I apologise, there's no data in this presentation. I did do statistical techniques one up the road here about 40 years ago. I got a provisional pass and have never looked at a standard deviation again. But I do like hanging out with statisticians because they're really cool and they make us policy people look cool because they give us good answers to things or not, as the case may be. So what I guess I want to do, I really grappled with what I would sort of talk about today because there is so much to talk about and I only have 15 minutes, but hopefully trying to bring together what we've heard both Jackie and Lisa say, and I've worked with both of them or been involved with both of the projects for some time now. And so trying to say, okay, well, what does this mean? How can we embed this into practice? So hopefully here we go. I should sort of say, that was the other thing. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah, what is it? Spock and live long and prosper. So we're going to come back to that. This is really important. I think one of the interesting things in the disaster space, and I should also say we're all disaster managers. Disasters are all our business. But the narrative that is currently, what we sort of see sort of spoken about. Now, here's another one. Who's seen San Andreas? Good. Okay, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I was going to say close your eyes and you can put your hand up if you don't want to admit that you've seen it. But so the narrative of this is, you know, a bad thing happens. There's usually a scientist who nobody pays any attention to. There's bumbling government officials. There's good guys and bad guys. And I know we took good guys and bad guys out of the equation last session, but this is the way it's portrayed. And the end scene of this, they're all standing in the wreckage of San Francisco, looking at the Golden Gate Bridge, and then they say, "What do we do now?" And then The Rock says, "And now we rebuild." And that's the end of the movie. And so nobody actually sort of sees this. So this is what comes next, and this is the challenge. So we have this narrative, and this you'll see that drives a lot of the commentary around disasters, which once it drives commentary, it starts to drive some of the political decisions and the like. And so the way we frame it is really around loss. And so so we look at how we are measuring disasters, and we do this at the Institute. We have a disaster mapper, and we measure disasters in terms of their scale as number of lives lost, injuries, houses lost, and usually insurance costs. Sometimes it might be kilometres of roads and things like that. So that determines sort of what a big disaster is. So nothing about all of the other things that are necessarily going on. And so this is the challenge. So we're framing it as a loss. And so what do we do with losses? Well, we replace them. And so this is why we end up with a focus on rebuilding rates as a measure of recovery, or we see people who want to donate a lot of goods because it's about replacement. So that in itself is a huge challenge, which we won't go into. yeah, so it's all about sort of replacing loss. And so this is why when you start sort of thinking about the complexity of recovery, and this is what, when you looked at the dashboard that Jackie put up, which really does starts to show the sort of complexity of those over 500 sort of indicators. This is stuff that's happening we've got to recognise this is happening in people's lives every day of the week. And I think the other thing that I've sort of observed with disasters over the years is that most of the things that happen to people in disasters happen to us all, but across the course of our lives. So, we might lose loved ones, we might lose a pet, we might move houses, we might lose our jobs, we might rebuild our homes, do all those sorts of things. But that happens over the course of our life. It's not something that collapses onto you at one time and that you have to deal with each and every one of those disruptions to your life. So that's one of the sorts of things that we're sort of dealing with in disasters. There is a system, and I was glad that we were sort of talking about trying to blow up the Federation before lunch, because the disaster system is also a federation. So states and territories are responsible for the emergency management. It's a constitutional thing, and that means we have 8 different ways of doing it, and with federal government providing support resources, policy coordination and the like. I won't say any more about that because we talked about the Federation beforehand, and you can extrapolate that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is context as well. So we often talk about disasters as being the thing that, this event has happened and somebody will press a big red button and all these people will appear and push everyone else out of the way, like all the local agencies that Jackie was talking about. And then they all go away and sort of we go on sort of business as usual. So there's that sort of we try and separate it out from, rather than thinking about the disaster event as being sort of part of the sort of stressors that occur in our communities and our lives as another one, and it's no different to a range of other things that can cause harm and disruption. And I just sort of put that up there because we talk about natural disasters a lot, but there's a really strong push to sort of move away from that terminology, because the definition of disaster is the intersection of a hazard with a vulnerable population. Now we focus on the hazard and think, the hazard is the natural event, but it's the vulnerable population. And why is the population vulnerable? It's vulnerable because humans have made decisions. They made decisions to subdivide and build in floodplains. They made decisions not to build houses according to cyclone code and the like, or earthquake code. And when you have this sort of, people sort of think about, it's a natural disaster, nothing you can do about it. So we're trying to shift that away, say there is human agency in all of these decisions, if only we would actually sort of take that on and run with it. This is one of my favourite movies. Why did I put this one up? It's in my notes. I can only get all of it. All right. So the other thing about disasters is that we look at them in a really linear way. So we start with a hazard, and we kind of work our way through the hazard and get, it happens, and we try and work out what happens and what the needs are and work back. And one of the things that sort of struck me, and I was having this conversation with Cameron at lunchtime. Thank you, Cameron, you've helped me. It clears my head. It's really about consequences, and so thinking about, what is it we're trying to manage and work backwards. So in Walter Mitty, Cheryl says to Walter, because he's got to work out, why has he got this strange message? She said, well, my creative writing teacher, crime writing teacher says, you start at the end, you work out your ending and you work backwards. So really it's about thinking about this is like consequences, systems, and then looking at sort of the challenges. And so what we're sort of seeing with the data that can be produced through the dashboard or through Lisa's research is helping us understand those consequences, and we can work backwards from them. This is rather than sort of taking a sort of linear hazard approach. So something that we produced last year when we do a sort of an annual major incidents report, and we talk about drivers of risk. And so the only previous years, the only drivers of risk were around climate. And we were sort of talking about, but there's a whole bunch of other things like economic factors and social cohesion and health and the like. So we started to sort of think about actually just trying to draw out all of those. And also to Lisa's point, she put it very succinctly and probably politely, as I know that you do, Lisa. But the other problem that we have in disasters is the recovery system is a problem. We make it worse. And a lot of people will say, disaster was bad, but gee, I tell you what, the system is worse. And so we also tried to look at that as part of the context. This is what people are going through, to whether they have to Lisa's point around thinking about the next thing. And this was really prompted by what people in northern New South Wales were going through with 2 major floods, and then a whole range of other flood alerts, flood warnings, on top of COVID, on top of fires, on top of drought and the like. So you can kind of see that these are sorts of things. This is why, and I think you put this up yesterday, Jackie, about the multiple, like that, how that fell off a cliff. Really important for policymakers to understand this. It's not just, we're just going to go out there and do a bit more preparedness because they're not ready for it. Well, they're not ready for it. They're not up for it. Ken Henry talked yesterday about what we value very eloquently. And I did think about taking this one off. Yeah, anyway, it's there. And so, again, trying to take it seriously, but shifting back to, again, from losses to what we value. And so this is where we sort of start to think, and Ken spoke yesterday, I think, about the economics of, a person who has a reason to value the life that they lead. And it was really interesting because a colleague of ours who's a fantastic person, really well experienced, and lead leader, she came up with a definition of recovery, because the definition of recovery is like, achieve a proper and level of functioning, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's really technocratic. And Anne would sort of say, well, and she's a survivor of fires as well, Black Saturday. She would say, well, recovery is when you wake up and you value the life that you're leading. And so it brings it back to values. And that sort of got me thinking, having been around, is that shifting it from that idea of loss and replacing losses to, it's kind of really about quality of life. And so people would often say to me, oh, can you tell me when recovery is going to be finished? The people, it's like, well, it depends. There is no answer other than when you start looking at quality of life, and then that's, self-reported quality of life is a really strong measure of recovery, I think, because it's the way people are actually describing how they're feeling. And, they're going to have a whole bunch of measures where they're sort of saying, like, it looks like, there's a whole bunch of things going on here. But they're sort of saying, yeah, no, I'm doing all right. So, or flip side, when we were involved in the sort of launch of the Beyond Bushfires sort of research, and remember we presented it back to communities and sort of said, look, these are the rates that we've found. So 26% people experiencing serious mental health issues after 3 years and 21 after 5 years. And the community members went, that's wrong. You're wrong. And so all the researchers, hang on, let's go. And so we worked out it was that sort of focus on, yes, there might not have been a diagnosable clinical condition, but people were feeling pretty ratchet. And so it was a quality of life question. So this is where these questions that sort of start to hit, like quality of life measures, which Lisa can talk about way better than I can, came into the survey. So we can start to see what people are talking about. So quality of life, I think, is really important. So we have to kind of try and shift that. This is my daughter on top of Mount Feathertop. I thought I'd sort of put a nice image, not toilet paper. So this is a homage to Ken. So what can we do about this? And so I think this is where the challenge is shifting that sort of paradigm. And this is where I like the dashboard dashboard that Jackie's been developing, and the sort of tools that Lisa has been developing. And, you know, the work that I do at the Institute and we do at the Institute is around how do we take this knowledge and help get it out to people. And so these are the tools that are going to make it a whole lot easier for people to understand what's going on first. And that's what people want to do. They want to know what the hell is happening to me or us in our community. And then what can I do with that? How can I use that? How can I adopt the language of the oppressors and build those funding submissions that will be compelling? So this content certainly helps us to develop those sorts of tools. But we need to be thinking about this. And to your point, Jackie, when you sort of said, we need the data fast and early, and I think that's really important. Because when we started sort of talking about the Beyond Bushfires study, it took us a long time to secure funding. We were only actually able to go out basically in year 3. But we need to identify the questions that we want, and maybe they're like sentinel indicators, I don't know what it is, and be able to include them in any of the sort of assistance that's being provided. So we think about practical assistance, the financial assistance. We need to start that at the start and start asking those questions, and that needs to be included in in any of the planning, and it can be funded through the disaster funding arrangements. I'm sure they will say that probably can't, but I think it can. So there's the things we need to design: the ability to get out and collect this data quickly. New Zealand has managed to do it after Christchurch, so if the Kiwis can do it, why can't we? So I think that's sort of really important. And then actually sort of going back to the start around the narrative, working to change how we describe disasters and disaster impacts. And one of the things, if you look at the Bushfire Royal Commission report, it talks a lot about recovery being long-term and recovery a lot, the mental health issues around bushfires. Now that's because we had the research that Lisa and her team did, and for us to be able to say, research from the University of Melbourne suggests that recovery is long-term and it has significant mental health considerations, and you keep saying that. So you build that as the narrative. And we all know journalists love a stat. So, that's the other thing. But we're actually really starting to sort of think about how do we shift that narrative so that we, I don't want to say that, change the narrative. That's all I want to say. Thank you.